This is Pop Culture Confidential, and I'm Christina Yerling Biru. Hey everyone, and welcome to Pop Culture Confidential. My guest today is the prize-winning production designer Fiona Crombie, who told me during our conversation that the greatest compliment an actor can give her is when they don't want to leave her set between takes. A perfect example of this is Jessie Buckley, whose incredible, powerful performance as Agnes Shakespeare in Hamnet had her taking naps in the bed they used for William and Agnes' home on set between scenes. Fiona Crombie's remarkable body of work includes production design on Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, Ari Aster's Beau Is Afraid, and her Oscar-nominated work on The Favourite, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. I talked to her about her breathtaking production design on Chloé Zhao's Hamnet, starring Paul Mescal as William Shakespeare and Jessie Buckley as his wife Agnes. The film is produced by Steven Spielberg and Sam Mendes, with cinematography by Lucas Zhao, among many other extraordinary collaborators. Hamnet is a story about art and nature. It's a love story as well as a story of loss and a meditation on how people experience grief differently. To tell this story, Fiona brought life and deep emotion into the spaces where Agnes and William lived, loved, and lost, while also recreating the legendary Globe Theatre, where art and life collide. I spoke with Fiona just after Jessie Buckley won Best Actress both at the Critics' Choice Awards and at the Golden Globes, where Hamnet itself took Best Picture. Fiona Crombie, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for speaking with me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
First, I just want to say I'm astonished by this film and your incredible work. It really touched me. It's, of course, based on Maggie O'Farrell's beautifully realized book. And kind of what we know about these families historically is not much, but William was 18 when he married Anne, who was 26. They lived in Stratford. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your research about these families. From a design perspective, how would these two families' houses have differed, like in terms of status and lives and things? How did you go into looking at the Hathaways and the Shakespeares?
You know, the very best resource was Maggie's book. So it's so beautifully researched and there's so much information. And so I had read the book before, some years ago, and then I revisited it with the very sort of like scholarly approach, you know, like underlining as much and sort of, you know, all the descriptions and the information, and we read about them and understood that Agnes actually came from a family that were they were doing pretty well. And so she sort of like took a kind of financial step down, like marrying into the Shakespeare family. And the Shakespeare family had actually, they had been quite a, like, you know, like, I guess, successful merchant family. Like things were, you know, there was a small business that was quite successful, and then they'd been mismanaged. And so they were not as well off as the Hathaway family. And so, yeah, that was really, we looked at that, and the first thing I did after I had the job, and I was in Brazil when I got the job. And so the very first thing I did when I came back to the UK was drive to Stratford-upon-Avon, and I met with our location managers, and we just did a walk around of the existing, the buildings, you know, the Shakespeare House on Henley Street, and then we went out to the Hathaway farm called Hewlands, and then we went to what is now left of what they call the new house. And it was a very instructive, you know, our sets are completely our interpretation of these homes, and there's nothing, I mean, there are definitely links and things that I lifted and sort of was, you know, that influenced the design, but the houses they're not the same, but that it was so informative in terms of getting a feeling, you know, for how people lived and the scale and just the sort of architectural details. And yeah, so
you said you underlined some of the things in the book. So what sort of jumped out at you in terms of what you think these families would have had in those houses? Or
Do you know, the thing that really struck me was just like the rituals, the daily life, what it takes to operate, like the kind of industry that is running a family and running a home at that time, and the kind of perpetual motion, I suppose. And I remember really, and also the house actually had lots of people in it, actually, and so for me, the thing sort of narratively was that, what does it feel like when suddenly that house is quiet, or what does it feel like suddenly when that house is still? And so it was thinking about putting all of these things in place so that when suddenly there's silence or stillness, it really registers, or suddenly it's dark, or again, like in the opposite of that is, what does it feel like suddenly to have children's footsteps running down the stairs, that so I was thinking about and paying attention to those kind of like very small, intimate details and gestures that make up real family life. And I was looking at that whilst also looking at my life and looking at my family and what it is to have, the things left on the staircase that never get taken up, or all the things that are very ordinary about just an intimate life. And then I tried to transpose those and put those into Elizabethan England.
And I have to say, that's why I'm asking, because I really feel this. There's something so, how should I call it, lived in your work in this movie, that's why I think that the families resonate so much. As a mother myself, and there's no distancing in your work.
That's exactly, that was absolutely my impulse from the very first read of the script. And actually my references in the first pass that I did for Chloé, like they were all things like laundry being dried, or like bowls of apples, or mess, like peelings, I don't know, just mess things, just the things that make up the tapestry of our lives that are not exceptional. And I think also it's exactly that. I wanted somehow to try to bring the audience as close to this family and make them as, I don't know, I say relatable, and it's not really about that. It's like, just, I think the best phrase is to bring them close. And that was very much my driving impulse the whole way through the film, that this shouldn't be a film to be admired, like to be at a distance from, where we sort of stand back and go, oh, it's Elizabethan England, or how,
Which is what we usually do with William Shakespeare, right? I mean, he's an iconic figure. We don't know.
Yes. I wanted it to be brought closer. And, it's all, and I think it's true of all the departments. I think about the hair and makeup artist, Nicole Stafford, the freckles that she put on Jessie, like it's that kind of minutiae, the tiny details that you can see the pores of their skin. It's the same with what we were doing with our choices in terms of the decoration and the build, and like the imperfections in the wood, and using all of these things that just gave the film a sense of real authenticity. You feel like it's that they exist, and they're not. They're built. they're on a back. They don't exist anymore. They're gone. They're in a skip somewhere.
And you can tell how personal it was to you. I read that the basil in the garden was from your garden, and the apples were from your set designer, and that you really brought in your.
No, mine was sage. I have
sage was it? Sorry.
I have a very overgrown sage, so it was no great hardship for me to donate sage. The apples came from Alice's mother's. Like she stripped the tree. Like her mother was devastated, and Alice was saying, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. They're going to be in the movie." It's like, oh yeah, it's not just on any table. It's on the table where it all happens. So.
It's on William Shakespeare's table.
Yeah. Exactly.
What did you learn about Tudor architecture that kind of surprised you for this project?
I think probably, honestly, what I learned was how it could underscore the emotion of the story. And that was the first thing. I remember feeling, looking, like when I started to read the script and, and obviously I understood the period in terms of, okay, so this would be this type of architecture. And, I remember thinking, it's not the prettiest architecture. Like, where do we go, having done sort of more ornate sort of period films.
Yeah,
And
The Favourite and things like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
I guess more.
Like, you know, and I think that I quite liked fineness in my work. But then there was something looking at the references and the images of these heavy, chunky beams, like the weight and the low ceilings, and the fact that they're built almost a lot of the buildings have too much weight on top. That's how they appear. You know, they're like coming sort of, they're quite oppressive. And also very much they have this linear quality where you have these beams that are very strong and graphic, which really sat in a beautiful way in complete opposition to the quality of the nature in the film. And so I felt very strongly that we should really embrace this architecture and like really look at having the beam work and like the woodwork as everywhere, really. And then when we built the house, the Henley Street house, we absolutely, we did one beam just slightly lower than the others in the main dining room. And so we really looked at how to make sure that it felt that the house was sort of, well, at times is the thing that I think is really interesting about that set, is that at times it's oppressive and other times it's got an embrace. You know, it has the ability to kind of shift, and depending on what is happening in that house. And so I think that the thing that I learned about the architecture actually was the way that it had the capacity for emotional resonance.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said actually that, quoting, that the house has a history of violence, that it added a depth to your design scheme. I'm not sure I quite understand. If you could explain how you would incorporate that.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, what we did was we just looked at, I mean, in simple terms from my end, you know, with the art department, we looked at, you know, the stairs. There was a broken spindle, like there was a crack in a window pane, there was scuff marks, there were things where something had hit the wall. We sort of built all those details, and they're very soft and they're very subtle, and Chloé was very keen to make sure that we just layered in very, very subtly a sort of a scarring in the house.
But excuse me, is it because of the father character?
Yeah, the father. Yeah, and so yeah, this sort of unpredictable. You never know quite when a cup might be pushed off the table or something. And then Alice Felton, my set decorator, she took it further with, you know, she made a point with her team of looking for, if there was an object that had been repaired, then it was good for our house. You know, or something that had a little scar in it, you know, then it was something that felt like it should come into the house. And I think that it's that. So we had absolutely no new fabrics. So we used objects and textures and textiles that had history. And so then that, I think, layered into the set build, which was a very quick set build, a sense of, I don't know, history and story.
I want to ask you about two specific scenes that, for me personally, I'm married to a screenwriter, so I know, and a writer, what it's like, and the spot where Paul or William is writing, which is, you know, so emotional for him, where he's basically writing his grief or his frustration. Or was there something particular you wanted to do with that area?
But that really, I think that what that space is it's basically like where they get married, and it's like full of the beginning, and then it becomes oppressive, and you know, and I think that we just did that really through framing in a lot of ways, and also lighting, and then, you know, not long after that, there's, you know, twins in there playing dress up, so it's like that again. It's this ability for the house to kind of span these phases of life, and like to sort of almost like expand and contract, and, you know, like open up and then close down, and, you know, it's and so really, yeah, that was just, we basically we sort of locked into, that's where his desk would be, because it's logical, it's where you would be near the window, you know, for the natural light, and then it just kind of stayed that way.
Yeah, and that whole scene's very much also like a stage, which
yes,
I'm sure. And then I want to ask you about the birth scene, which, if there's something in particular in your thinking and in building and because that's a long, very powerful scene with a lot of meaning, how you approached that.
Well, really, it was about coming up with that house as a whole, like in terms of, like I was saying, it needs to sort of satisfy all these different moments. And we did think about, like, that particular room is the dining room. And so then, like, instead of moving things out, things are just moved to the side, you know, like it suddenly becomes like a multi-purpose. It's where, you know, there is birth in that room and there is death in that room. And, but really I kept thinking a lot about what is it like when a child walks down the stairs, or what is it like when Will comes in and sees, you know, all those framing. Like, it was very important. I worked very closely with Lukash when we were designing the house, and we sat with the model, you know, the 3D model of the house, and walked through and talked about angles and really composed the house, understanding these beats and understanding the shots and understanding the feeling that we wanted to get. And certainly this idea of this kind of silent observer of death being in a corner of that house, you know, and like we looked for opportunities to have this kind of, I kept thinking of like death being just in, you know, just out the corner of your eye, or it's just at the end of the dark corridor, or just at the top of the stairs. And like, so just, we looked for opportunities to kind of have that playing always just out of frame, if that makes sense. So that was the design. And so there's lots of apertures, there's lots of windows, you're looking through doors all the time, there's little rooms that are going off that you're not quite sure what's going on in there. But that was all, you know, very, very sort of composed. Yeah.
I want to, of course, ask you about the globe, but before then, I was just thinking, for you as a production designer, when you've made all this, you've thought of this, you've worked with Chloé and Lukash, and then the actors walk in, Paul and Jessie and the children. It's like, does something happen in that moment? And in this particular film, was something changed when you actually saw Paul and Jessie move around in this area?
It's such a beautiful transaction. I love the transaction of handing over. It's absolutely lovely. And we were so tired, I cannot tell you, because we were shooting the farm and the countryside. And so that was like 3 hours away. So the way that I was operating was I was driving out there, seeing how they were going, setting up, you know, spending a couple of days there, and then driving back because I had to keep my eye on the build. And then in reverse, Alice Felton, my set decorator, was operating in reverse. So she would be where I wasn't, so that we were kind of, and then, you know, my art directors were around and we would check in. So there was so much driving, and I did work 21 days straight. I remember that because it was probably a record. And I was so tired by that handover that I had no adrenaline. And I remember Paul coming up and saying like, "Oh, Fiona, it's so beautiful." And I was like, you know, it's just really amazing. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so flat. I have nothing. And and then somebody shouted me a vitamin infusion and it was all great. So the next day it was like nothing had happened. Yeah.
But I'm sure it must be a very powerful moment when they walk in character.
Oh, it's amazing. And well, do you know what the greatest compliment is? I mean, aside from, I do think it's a particularly beautiful thing when you're watching actors inhabit spaces and it's like that it was always there. So I think that's such an incredible, you know, like performance skill to inhabit space. And it's I really, really enjoy giving immersive spaces. I enjoy offering that up for performance. But the greatest compliment is when they don't want to leave. And so when they're having a break and they're still in the garden, or they're having a break, like Jessie was a big fan of the bed and would sleep, have little naps up in that space. And you just think, well, okay, like we've got it right. Because yes, exactly, it is home. And that is it's really beautiful when that happens.
Yeah, and I can imagine Chloé seems like someone who makes this feeling of family very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
But moving on to the globe, because this is incredible. You basically rebuilt it, correct? Through research and tell me a little bit about your approach.
Well, we really did It's very much a combination. So it's like there are certainly aspects of it that are, really architecturally accurate, and then we interpret it our own way. So it's 70% the size of the real globe. The globe that we've built is the first globe, which it burnt down very quickly. So there's actually not a lot of records of what that globe was. And we certainly didn't see images of what the inside of that globe was. So the second globe is the one that's been rebuilt now. And that's a later and far more ornate. So if you do the globe tour, there's marble columns, and it's like a real kind of theatrical palace. Whereas ours obviously it has a raw quality that felt right for our story and our film. And so when we visited the real globe, we did a little field trip, and we all felt that the scale was, it was too big. It needed to have just a little bit more intimacy for us. And yeah, the big note from Chloé was, I want it to feel like the inside of a tree. And so that for me meant really simplifying the joinery, but looking at I looked at all these lovely round barns and like interesting ways of putting wood together. And then we found reclaimed timbers and created our own version of the globe. And then took that even further and like invented what we put on the stage for our version of, our Hamnet, I should say.
Yeah. I understand. It's you. I do that too. Yeah. And I understand that you dressed the backstage very much, even things that we maybe the viewers didn't get to see, but for the actors with costumes.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We made it a functional theatre as well. So in the shooting of it, we ran quite a lot of the play. Like there were different, there were scene changes, and we had our prop men dressed up as stage hands, and so like we had prop tables and we had all the different areas, and so that the play could run really smoothly. But also we did all sorts of detailing because Shakespeare's company was a repertory company. We had props from the other plays. So we had, we did research about, what plays preceded Hamlet.
Wow.
And then dressed the backstage so that if they were to decide to do Midsummer Night's Dream, then that was okay because there was, we have props. And so it was a really lovely thing to spend our time when we were making the film, looking at what can we put into our decoration that informs his plays. Like how are we kind of visually planting seeds for, I don't know, obviously there's themes, like there's twins, and there's just, there's storms, and there's different elements that pop up that are in our film that, we're saying appear in his work, not just the death of a boy.
Right.
So, yeah.
When you were studying the theaters, both the one that the original one and the other one, were there things about, how they built and acoustics or views or things that you thought, wow, they knew what they were doing?
Well, the big thing I think is that we sort of don't think about really is the fact that they were daylight. We're so used to seeing theatre at night or in the dark with the lights, and of course so there was a really beautiful connection between audience and player that I think we capture in the film.
Oh yes, that's the whole.
And so yeah, but that openness to the sky, was I think something that I hadn't really considered until we were there, thinking, oh, of course, you are interacting in quite a different way, and even the whole kind of, the vocalizing from the audience and their kind of participation, and the fact that, this is entertainment. There was nothing else. Like people mostly were illiterate. So like, this is where you came to get your stories, and they were wondrous, even though they're the most simple, like in our version, we have a backcloth, we have scenery. Actually, that most likely would not have been there. So you would have had a bare stage with, the odd kind of noise or like, little kind of theatrical device, but, it would have been sort of furniture coming on and off and characters. But even so, you were transported. And I think there's something, about that, the power of words, and the power of an audience to imagine and go on a journey with a story.
Did it make you realize anything about William Shakespeare's writing? The fact that he was open sky and light, and like, oh, I realized that's why he did that with that story. Or,
well, I think, to be honest, like, I think I always thought of William Shakespeare as like, yeah, this, like, something to be studied, So it's like, and it was going to his house, and I thought it's so popular. Like, people, it's like a pilgrimage. Like, if you're into, for people that are theatrical or literary, the people that have walked, I mean, there's like a wall, I think, where people have signed, and there's all sorts of people have been there. But even on the day that I was there, it was like all the different languages being spoken around me just was evidence of the reach of this person and his body of work. And I think, that sort of reframed, because I was like, of course, because in a way it's like, you read it at school, you struggle. I've designed Macbeth, like, for a film, and I've designed, Shakespeare for theatre. But in a way, I felt like I came at it from a kind of like a scholarly point of view, whereas this, understanding context, even though it's like fictional context potentially, it just gave me more, I don't know, I found it fascinating to see the parallels between his life, or the themes that, like, the obvious one is the twins, how, all the ability for art to inform you, and to inform your life, to inform your art.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying sort of at the beginning. I think we come to Shakespeare as viewers very academically, and then this movie is so lived in, and it's a real family, and it's as you said, the children running down the stairs, and it's a completely way to meet him, I think.
Yes.
But what would you say was your biggest and uniquest challenge on this project in particular?
I think actually exactly what I was saying earlier, like finding ways to make the film have like an immediacy and an intimacy, and to also, I mean, there were obviously like practical things like, oh, I've got to drive a long way, and I've got to build sets, and I've got to, hope for the best. But really it was that drive for it to be emotional and have an emotional resonance in the architecture and in the decoration. So I felt like it was a special project on the page, and I just wanted to honor that, really. And that meant that there was a real attention to detail, like very focused on, what are the plants in the backyard? Are they accurate? Do they look like they have been there for 20 years? Like, how do I do that in 9 weeks? Like, how can I do this? So that that was a real it was a real push. Yeah.
Well, you certainly did that. I mean, it's everything you're talking about is accomplished. I thank you so much, because I imagine you're super busy, and that you took your time with me to talk about this.
Thank you. It's lovely to think about it all again.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Fiona Crombie, and make sure not to miss Hamnet. And thank you for listening. Pop Culture Confidential is a part of the Evergreen Podcast Network, and you can find us wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you. See you next time.